If you live under a rock, probably a lot of people from our church have no idea what this podcast is about. This is kind of like if you're in the ministry world, you've at least heard about it, but there is a new podcast out by Mike Cosper and Christianity Today, and it's called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. And so I'm not going to lie, I know a lot of people holier than me were initially a little bit nervous about it, but I was immediately like, let's do this. I'm excited for this podcast. A couple of reasons. One, I followed Mars Hill a lot. I was like his demographic that he reached the most. I was in college when he was at his peak, and he reached a lot of college guys, like that's for sure. But the other thing is I know Mike Cosper. I don't know him, but I read his books and I follow him a lot, and I know he's legit. And so I really trusted him, and I really knew that he would have, the right perspective on how to present it. You haven't listened to every episode.
No. How many are out now? How many episodes?
It's now 7.
So I want to say I haven't listened to the last 2 or 3.
Yeah, probably. You listened to the woman one though, right?
Yeah.
How we treat women?
Yeah.
I think that was episode 5.
Okay. So just the last 2 then?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I listened to Mark Driscoll back in college also.
Not like
from
a
your
ton?
influence. But
Yeah.
no, not all the time.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you would be like, talk about something specific or a series he was preaching through.
Yeah, I went to one service, a Mars Hill service in Orange County, because I was at Cal Baptist. And so I was excited. Literally the design nerd in me. I was excited to get all of their connection cards, all the stuff that they give out.
I did that with a lot of churches in college.
Anytime I visit a church, like I'm grabbing that stuff because I'm a pastor at heart, but I love to design. And I didn't know I was a video guy at that point. But I just love all things media. I think it's so fascinating for some reason. David, we got you. Good evening. We've been going live at wrong times for him. So shout out to you, brother. So anyways, so I've been to one, and it was a unique experience. That was actually the first and only service I've been to where the pastor was live streamed in. And that was strange, for sure. But what I thought was even stranger, which I guess is a good thing, is the audience laughed at him, talked back at him, and it's like, he can't hear you,
That would be an interesting dynamic.
It was a really weird thing. So I'm trying to make sure, because I'm always so much louder than you, because you just don't talk as loud.
I'm not loud. Sorry. I don't know.
So all that to say, when the podcast came out, I thought it'd be helpful to learn some lessons. If you're not familiar with the context, even if you've never heard the podcast, we think that this conversation will be helpful. If you are a church member, if you are a pastor, ministry leader of any sort, even a non-believer, just kind of peeking behind the curtain, we think this conversation is helpful altogether, because what I think is helpful when you look at this kind of story is you don't, especially as you're kind of thinking through it, you're not really getting so caught up in the details of these actual people, of actually like Mark, but you're like, okay, what's the principle to take here? How do I make sure I don't fall into those kind of traps? And so that's the kind of stuff I want to talk about. You hear our middle daughter?
I'm trying to decide if I should go.
Yeah. Okay. So I was on the drive tonight and I said, all right, Jordan, I got some thoughts put down. So you want to just go through here?
Yeah.
So some things that I've been thinking through, processing, some of it is disturbing to me. Some of it I'm trying to figure out as a pastor. What does this mean? I guess we can kind of go down the order of what we were talking about. Let's start here, actually. I understand the hesitancy to listen to this podcast because it's going behind the scenes and it's actually talking about people who, I guess, Mike Cosper has given Mark Driscoll an opportunity to defend himself, but he won't. So you're talking about people, not talking to people. And that is a little bit of a red flag, kind of like, however, I think it's important because it's helping protect people, blah, blah. I don't need to keep, doing that kind of like, it's good, but it's also like, it's not the best situation. Something I've noticed on YouTube and just ministry in general is you can really get a crowd and you can really get people's attention when you're polarizing. It's really important. I was listening to Sean Cannell's video today on the 5 key things that he's learned from Dave Ramsey and his YouTube channel. I suggest you guys check it out. It's on Think Media channel. It's really good, kind of like YouTube strategy that he learned from Dave Ramsey. But they said, number 2, the biggest thing about Dave Ramsey is he's so polarizing, like for him, like no credit cards, right? And all this stuff. And so to be successful on YouTube, to be successful in ministry, and that's the whole question. What is success? To get a lot of attention, you have to be polarizing. You have to, I think, engage in some degree. It flirts on the line of gossip. You know, it flirts on the line of slander. And when you look at the devil, he's diabolos, which is diabolical liar, which is like a slanderer. Like Satan is a slanderer.
Right.
And so it's so hard to play that game when you are making a podcast like this, but I think it's healthy because I think the way he's doing is so good. But for a lot of us, how do I put this? I'm just really discouraged by the amount of people on YouTube that have nearly no ministry experience, that are still in their 20s or something, and they have the audacity to like call out these preachers and these pastors.
Right.
And, you know, they've never met these pastors. They don't know the ins and outs of things. Part of me gets it, though. It's like doctrine is doctrine. So if there's heresy, you need to call it out. But some of these things that people call each other out on are not like first tier issues, or they totally misunderstood or whatever. And even if it's that, maybe this is just a personal thing. I know that's a cop-out. I engaged in it a little bit for a while, kind of talking about the most major thing I did was a Perry Stone message that he did. And I was bothered by it. So I was like, let's talk about it. And I knew it would do well on YouTube, and it did. But I didn't feel the best about myself after, you know, like I actually talked to Jason Mayfield, and he's like, yeah, I've met him before. And Perry was a really nice guy to me and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, man, you know, like I just don't ever want to meet somebody, run into somebody, and they're like, oh yeah, I know you. You made a video about me on YouTube.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it's like these heresy hunters that are on YouTube, and you grow fast. You don't even have to have a good production. You don't even have that good of a personality. But if you're just calling people out, digging into problems, like David Platt, you know, he's having this big old issue.
Right.
I get it to some extent to speak into it to a degree, but others, like, it's just malicious. You don't know the whole story. And so it's something that's really on my heart. And I want to make sure when we're talking about this podcast, you know, like, I think Mike Cosper has successfully balanced himself on this line, and hasn't turned it into slander or gossip. But I think a lot of us aren't that good at it. And so I am just weary that we're doing it, not because like God has called us to defend the truth, but just because we know it'll get clicks, and it does, and it will, and you can get famous or whatever. And I just have never been willing to do that, besides maybe one or two times. And even then I'm like, I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. All that to be said, it's like, I do think we need to have a bigger conversation, especially, man, I have a professor, Dr. Morgan. He told me, you probably shouldn't have, you don't have your own thoughts about much of anything theologically, like really deep theological issues, until you're 40. Because so much of these problems, you know, like you have to live life and you experience things, and it takes a while to think through. So like a lot of these people, they're saying what they're saying because they heard it from somebody else, you know? Right. But I also think you recognize you have so much energy in your 20s and 30s or 40s and whatever. I don't know. I have energy still, and I'm 29. I'm not 30 yet. I keep doing that. But you know, do you want it? Here's what I mean. I'm rambling. Do you want to be known as a guy who calls other people out?
Well,
you know?
Yeah. But I also think like it very much stems from the heart of it. Like why it's very singular to like the problem, you know, like you can't make a general statement and say like, oh, across the board, calling out a leader for whatever is slander or gossip, you know, like it's case by case. Mm-hmm. And it's what specifically is the problem, what was happening, why is this being talked about? And then what's their motive behind it? Like, is the motive to like get clicks and all of a sudden be famous on YouTube? You know what I mean? So I think that it very much depends. And I feel like just from what I've listened to, I feel like Mike Cosper didn't. He kind of approaches it the right way.
Yeah, I think he's doing it right.
So I think it just, you know, like it just depends.
Yeah, I think you have to be a good storyteller. Yeah, it's really good. But all that to say, just pump the brakes. And I would say, what I've actually done, and I need to stop doing, is I click on videos I know is just stupid. I'm like, this guy, he's slamming a guy. So I want to watch to hear what he has to say, even though it's like, dude, like this guy he's not woke or whatever you're calling him, and, labeling all these pastors, these things. And I'm watching it just to kind of refute it in my mind. Now I'm like, this encouraged him. He doesn't know I disagree with it and think it's dumb. He's just like, oh, more and more views. So I'm saying, you know what? This isn't worth my time to engage in. It's feeding the flesh. It's not feeding the spirit. Again, at the same time, we need to be passionate about doctrine. We need to defend doctrine. But I think there's a way to do it without calling people's names out and all this stuff. So, yeah, we do need to be known more about what we are for, not what we are against. And so, so all of that to say, I think some people could enjoy this podcast for all the wrong reasons. And I think maybe Mike Cosper might leave some people like, oh man, I wanted to hear more of the dirt. And I think he's doing a good job at that. The next thing I want to talk about is a troubling thought process behind this whole podcast. Is they were saying, there's a lot of abuse behind the scenes. There's mishandling of money. But a lot of it is just like, him running people over, Mark Driscoll just calling people out or whatever. And again, I just talked about let's not slander, so I don't want to dive into that. So I just want to kind of go above that and talk more principles here. But this whole process, they're all saying we never dealt with these internal issues. We never said stop. We never really, gone through the process of calling somebody out on their sin in the process of restoration, because we just kept growing. They kept saying we were baptizing like every week. So how do God must be in this, if there's so much fruit.
Yeah. I don't know. That's hard too. Like logically you look at it and you're like, okay, like if they're doing things all the wrong way, then they just wouldn't see fruit from that. And that's not always the case. And I think that, I don't know, like ultimately God's going to use, even when we mess up, like he uses broken people. And that's kind of the whole point, not to give an excuse to be
right,
to live in our brokenness, but like he is, like if that's the one time that person's going to hear about Jesus, like the Lord's going to use that, you know what I mean? So, but it's not
but then the question
it's not
is
like, oh, it's okay because there's growth.
Yeah, I just have so many thoughts because you can't. I think people become yes men around the head leader when just things seem to be growing. And I think we have to say, okay, what are we worshiping? We're not worshiping growth. We're not worshiping, celebrity culture. We need to worship Jesus. And I think that means sometimes being right, doing the right thing will harm the organization, but that's okay. And the reality is it looks like, oh, God's using it, so everything's fine. But then the question is that we have to look back, and I think there's a lot of stories of this, and I think that's why Mike Cosper addressed it in the latest episode 7. It looked like a lot of fruit, but now a lot of those people, I don't know the number, but there is a number of people who are deconstructing their faith because it was built on somebody, or it happened at a Mars Hill service, and then you hear about he just has, a lot of these character flaws.
Right.
And it's like, how can somebody preach this gospel of grace and righteousness and peace and hope, but yet treat people this way and do money, that? It's really crazy.
It is. I still can't. I know I still can't comprehend a lot of the stuff that we've been told through the podcast of like things that happened. I could just think like there's no way. But yet it happened and they grew. They're huge.
Mm-hmm. So it's just a warning. It's like so much of the fruit that we produce in ministry, you can actually see. I was talking to a church planner in Las Vegas, and he said that he had just left his station. He planted a church 7 years ago in Portland and then left. And he had no idea because their going away party, people, like a bunch of people came out and was like, here's how you blessed my life. Here's how you changed my life. And he's like, I had no idea. Like, I thought those people wrote me off. I thought nothing ever happened. And, some people just aren't willing, people just don't share everything or whatever. But that just reminded me, he's like, Trey, you have no idea the kind of ministry you have, especially like being on YouTube. You have no idea like who you're blessing, right? Where am I going with that?
I don't know.
Oh, about fruit. So, a lot of us, we only look at fruit of what's visible. Well, a lot of like spiritual fruit in the kingdom of God, like the parable of the mustard seed, you can't see it. It's small. It seems insignificant, but it has, everlasting fruit.
Right.
So I don't know. It's hard. So in other words, it was a really helpful reminder. Just because there's fruit doesn't mean that they're being faithful. And even so, even if you're being faithful to a point and you did everything right, God doesn't promise to bless past faithfulness. Like, we have to wake up every day and, start again and abide with Jesus today.
Right.
And I heard an interview with David Platt not too long ago, and he said it terrifies him. Did you ever read Radical?
I don't think so.
Wow. That came out in college. Okay. I think it was like right before I went to Malaysia the first time.
Okay.
And so when you read that book, you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad for owning a TV. We need to sell it and give it to the nations. I mean, it's just like makes you feel bad about everything, but it's a great book. But he, his name, like he was nobody ever heard of him. And then this book came out, and then, the whole world heard about him. But he said it terrifies him because of that fruit. He was living off of that fame and just like the success. And he admits that his quiet time was next to nothing. And meanwhile, he was traveling the world sharing this message about Radical. But he's like, my heart was hollow. Like, I was deadened inside. My devotion life was nothing.
Yeah, well, Jenny Allen talks about the same thing in her book. Get out of your head. I forget what it's called. Mm-hmm. But she talks about the same thing. It's like she was going through this like season of like super like dryness. Like she was questioning her faith and all sorts of different things. And yet she was traveling and speaking and doing all these things. And she was just like so like burdened by the fact that she could just go up on stage and tell a room full of people about this love and this grace and this truth, and then go back to her hotel room and question all of it. Like, is that even true? Like, what I just told them, is that even true? But yet she'd get up on stage and she'd do it all again.
Right.
Like, but she was stuck in this, she just went through this season.
Wow.
Where she was traveling and talking, but yet personally was going through such darkness.
And how do you do that? Do you just stop? Do you just say, you know what? I'm not going to be on stage anymore? That's what she ended up saying she had to do. Like, she kind of had to withdraw and like admit some of the things that she was struggling with. She's like, I internalized all of it. That was the point. It's like she was all in her head. Yeah. She internalized everything. And when she started voicing them to like trusted friends and like fellow believers, sisters in Christ, like she was like, they lost its power. Like when I kept all that in my mind, whatever, it's totally off topic, but yeah, it's that thing where it's like, you never really know. And so that's the hard, as a congregation, you can't just be like, well, how's this guy's quiet time? Like you got to give people the benefit of the doubt, but it's also like to the elder board and the leadership team. There's got to be that accountability. And, but it's just pretty crazy to me that there's a possibility that I can begin to produce fruit, but yet not be connected to the vine. And so then is that really fruit? That's the question. But I can produce earthly fruit, where it looks like, man, the church is growing, the budget's expanding, and people put their hope in that. Our hope is in Jesus and nothing else, And so that's what I'm grateful for in this time, in this season of our life. My whole life, I started preaching at 16. People were saying like, just, things you're going to make it big so quick. And it's not been as quick as I thought it would be. But I'm like really grateful for that, because I have learned, especially those last 5.5 years of planting a church, just the importance of abiding in Christ. And, I went to Jesus because I had nothing else. It's like I looked for ministry success and it wasn't there. And so by God's grace, I think he has withheld that to the degree that I thought we would have. I'm always careful because God's done so much in our church. You don't want to just say it's nothing, but I'm grateful that God has allowed me to recognize, oh, I need Jesus more than anything. You got to go take care of the kid. Radical wrecked me as well too. So yeah, I think that it's that question of, praise God for fruit, but then the question is, was it fruit? And was God just like, you know what? I know this is a bad situation, but I'm going to use it for my glory. So I'm going to save people while I can. It's just so strange. It's hard to think through and process. And again, I think it's why I'm going to have a few people. I'm lining up some interviews for people who've gone through deconstruction. And so one of them I'm going to interview on August 30th. I'm really excited about. But I think the biggest part of what it seems like people are deconstructing about is because of just the hypocrisy of Christian faith leaders. And, a guy like Mark Driscoll, I mean, like he knows what he's talking about. Like when you hear him preach, he's not just doing like, he's talking about the supremacy of Christ. And he says, what's his line? Something about, it's all about Jesus, right? And so, it just really wrecks you that even if they say the right words and even if it looks like it's the right outcome, I think that the lesson to take from is, okay, pastor, okay, whatever you are, if God is using you in your life, you still need to walk in the fear of the Lord, and you still need to embrace humility and recognize all of this is a gift. This could be taken away in a moment. And, nothing in my hands I bring, simply to the cross I cling. Yeah, it's just crazy to me. I think a lot of us, that was one more thing I was thinking about along those lines, is we give authority to people. We trust people just by their success. And, I wish we can come up with different markers to trust people with, because simply just having success in ministry doesn't actually make you trustworthy. I think we've seen that over and over. So that was my thought. It's kind of terrifying that you can have no character and yet have what seems to be a good long season of fruit. And, it's just, I know people of great character who do not have this huge, overwhelming fruit. I mean, it's hard to imagine. Not many people has had as much ministry success as Mark Driscoll and, in the heyday of Mars Hill. It was insane what they were able to do. 15,000 people, 5 different states. So we have to come up with different metric system to figure out, So that's along the other lines, though, I want to talk about is pathological dualism. What is pathological dualism?
I have no idea.
So pathological dualism was a phrase coined by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, and he calls it pathological dualism. And the definition is one side is unimpeachably good, means you can't impeach them. It's a presidential term, you can't get rid of them. He's just great. The other side is irreversibly bad. So they are bad and there's no way to reverse the curse. They are just terrible. Now, this is absolutely antithetical to the gospel, right? We believe without Christ, we're not just bad, we are dead. But because of the sacrifice of Jesus, and when we confess and believe in him and put our faith and trust in Jesus Christ, he raises us to life. It doesn't matter what your background was, you're forgiven and you have a new future. I mean, Saul turned into Paul. If you look at the story of Saul, he did a lot of terrible things, and then he began doing amazing things because of Christ in him, the hope of glory. So pathological dualism is this belief that is rampant in politics today, rampant in what people talk about in church world today. That's why I started to do a series, and I may start it up again, talking about other, Christian leaders, but in different circles than mine. I'm in the Southern Baptist circle. And so there's a lot of people outside of my quote unquote tribe or circle. But there's lessons I've learned from them. And I believe I can actually learn from anybody. I believe I can even learn from somebody who is an atheist, because I think all truth is God's truth. And I think everybody has a unique experience, and I can take that and with my Bible correctly kind of learn from it and then use it for the glory of God. So like I made a video one time before my sabbatical. Like I heard a TD Jakes talk. I don't ever listen to him. I disagree with some stuff, like pretty fundamental. But then I heard a leadership talk and I thought, this guy has led a lot of people. He probably has a lot of wisdom. And I listened to it and it was deeply encouraging for me. I mean, it encouraged me to keep moving forward. It encouraged me to just speak into people's life. I learned a lot from it. So I did a quick video about it, and I got some flack for that, but I just have this belief that all truth is God's truth. And I also believe that, the kingdom of God is much larger than we can imagine. And so anyways, I say all that to say pathological dualism, what we're struggling with is now somebody like a Mark Driscoll during the Mars Hill times. We learned that he was abusive, behind the scenes, and he did this and that, and he hurt people, blah, blah, blah. But then you hear a sermon and it was great. So pathological dualism will say, well, no, he's a bad person, so everything he said was bad. That's incorrect. He can still say a lot of really wise stuff. Because first of all, I mean, every pastor, every person you'll ever meet is a sinner. I know there are degrees to this, and there are some degrees of sin where they just can't be in ministry anymore. But, and even heard my buddy Chase Jones make a video today responding to what happened with Joe Solomon, but he talked about like Ravi Zacharias, just because like his corruption that he had, it doesn't mean his books were incorrect. It was still truth, because all truth is God's truth. So I think some people are really struggling because it's like, oh man, I guess I think if you don't think this through, you can hear this podcast and then just ignore, like forget, ignore, say everything Mark Driscoll's ever said is wrong. That's what I'm trying to say, which is incorrect.
Right.
Now, should you keep listening? See, I don't know. I think that's a personal decision you got to figure out. But I just fear that we are so caught up in pathological dualism, and we see it in politics, and sadly we see it in the church, where if somebody does certain sins that you don't like, then everything they've ever done is just wrong, and they've never done anything good. I think that there was fruit at Mars Hill. I think there were some incredible things that happened. I was inspired to plant a church. Not directly. It wasn't like because of Mars Hill I planted my church, but I think it was a part of the conversation. You know, it was in my mind. They kept saying, make disciples and plant churches. And, you know, 6 years later, I wound up doing the very same thing that they kept talking about. So I think there was some influence there. So it's hard not to, you know, I think his influence is very far reaching, and he's a smart guy.
Right.
And I think like he gave me permission to know, you know, like, give a lot of context and talk about the Bible in ways that's much more than just one point. Like he would have 18 points sometimes in sermons. It's like, oh, like I thought you had to always preach like Andy Stanley. You have one main idea, one point, and you just have to figure out new stories and different ways to accentuate that one point. Well, Mark Driscoll's like, no, I got 19,000 points that I've learned from culture and history and the Bible. And I thought that was really helpful. So I think we need to be wary of pathological dualism. You want to add anything in that
No.
part of the conversation?
No. I mean, it makes sense. Just, yeah, we're all fallen people. So it's like, you can't.
But I know there's a line to that, right? Because you can say we're all fallen people, so then let's just overlook it. It's like,
I know,
it's
right.
not.
Like, you can't ignore. There are certain things you can't ignore.
Yeah.
For sure. But that doesn't mean
that doesn't rob your experience.
Right.
What if you grew from one of his sermons? You can
Right.
still have grown from that sermon.
Right. You, just like you can't say across the board, like, oh, because all this has come out about him. If you were going to his church or you were ever saved to his church, you're not saved anymore. Well, no, that's not true. Like,
Right.
you can't say that.
Right. Yeah, I would say it's similar to cancel culture, Larry. Like the pastor who spoke at a youth conference when I was 13 and I surrendered my life to ministries, the bro is in prison right now,
right,
for doing some stupid stuff. So it's like, but that actually has never rocked me because I knew he was just a messenger, you know, like I remember I used this illustration a lot back in the day when I was like teaching youth. It's like, we're the glove and, you know, God is the hand. And so we're fulfilling our purpose when we allow God to use us. You're looking at my hand like it was a weird illustration.
No, there's weird markings on your hand.
Oh, I know. I don't know what happened.
I was so confused. Anyway, sorry.
You would. I don't know what I touched. Something in the garage. But yeah, you know, it's like, it wasn't the glove that had this power. It was the hand behind it.
Right, right.
And so, but I think a lot of deconstruction is happening. And I don't know. And I'm going to have a lot of these conversations with people who've gone through deconstruction and have been on the other side. Because I don't know why so many, I don't even know if it's a lot or if it's just those who are really famous that are going through it, or if this is a huge epidemic. So I want to ask these questions, but it has never rocked my faith. And I'm grateful for that grace. And some people it does. So I just, yeah, pathological dualism is antithetical to the gospel, but so is no accountability. So we have to keep people accountable. And that's actually why I'll mention this one as the next topic. Let me know below. Here's my book recommendation for the night, A Church Called Tov. This is by Scott McKnight and Laura Barringer. Tov is the Hebrew word for good and goodness. And I thought it was a really helpful, what's up, Perkins family in Haiti. Love the videos you're making right now, bro. You're at stateside right now. But this book is, I think, a must read for everybody who's in ministry to make sure that you don't become a church that is toxic. You know, so this is all about being a Tov church, being a church of goodness, where the leaders are accountable, that people aren't hurt. It's a really, really important thing to make sure that we're keeping us all accountable, to make sure that we're not hurting people intentionally or even unintentionally as much as we can. You have not read the book yet.
No.
So you cannot speak into it, but it's a really helpful book. I think it's a good wake-up call for me to recognize, okay, what are some things I need to institute in my church? And it's just pretty crazy how when you begin to experience success, people just overlook all these little things. And honestly, as a pastor, it's annoying to have a board of people that constantly keep you accountable. And you feel like you're holding me back. Just trust me. But they need to not be yes men. They need to say, whoa, let's pump the brakes. Okay, that's a decision of yours, but let's, so it's a hard balance. But being a church called Tove is so helpful. And I think everybody should read it if they're feeling convicted about this Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast and want to make sure they don't become a church that's toxic. They don't really zero in on Mark Driscoll in this book. They zero in on Willow Creek and Bill Hybels because they actually were on staff there in the past. And that's a whole story about a really successful pastor that used his power to, do things with women and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, it's just crazy because they just allowed it to happen. And it was all about loyalty over truth and all this stuff, success and growth over just holiness and goodness. And so I thought it was a really, really helpful book. Talking about Francis Chan seems to spark some of that dualism of folks close to me. I found a lot of his views helpful, but some folks are just writing him off. Oh, interesting. I heard some people, that he's just kind of gone different or wacko or something lately. Is there anything else you want to add before we go to the next topic?
No, I don't think so.
I just really need a break of talking and a drink.
I don't know.
How about the gender roles? Remember the podcast? What are your thoughts on anything in those? How to treat women? How should the church treat women?
Yeah. I feel like I don't know. It's hard. I feel like you step on toes almost either way you say anything. Anything. So
get polarizing, babe. That's how you grow.
I think that. You
were pretty shocked when we were listening to that episode.
Yeah. I think that women deserve roles in leadership and things. I don't think that church should be focused on the men and do I think that's so hard.
That's a great question. I want to ask.
I do think that there is a culture, our culture today, the men are lacking in they're not leaders.
Okay.
Not everyone, but there is definitely a lack of male, they're just, it's that they're not getting married until they're way late. They're just living that college life until they're 28, 29. And you're like, dude, you graduated college how long ago?
Yeah. When I hang out with friends, even recently, I'm like, oh my gosh, Jordan, they're still in college or even they're still in high school.
Right. In mindset. So I definitely think that there is a reason to be calling our, the men up, to be, not calling them out, but calling them up.
That's my point on Sunday. I'm taking that from Coach. From Coach Williams, Monty Williams.
It's the Sons. But I think that is beneficial.
So should that happen on a Sunday context, or do you think that has to happen at men's conferences? How do you? I'm so grateful. Man, my neck. I just heard it. I'm in that. I can barely move my neck right now. I don't know what I did wrong. So I got a spinning chair. How do you, as a woman, feel about me on a Sunday spending more than half the time look at me, men, and talking to the men? Do you feel left out or do you feel encouraged? That's a real question of mine. Cause Mark Driscoll was super successful because he just kept, and I think there's something to calling up the men, but how does that make the women feel? So what is your perspective on all that? That's something that's been the biggest thing I've been trying to mull around in my brain because of this podcast.
I think I'd probably have a skewed opinion versus a female at church who wasn't the pastor's wife. It's, you know what I mean? You are the man, it's my
That's
husband
right. You can
up
just
there.
stop right there. You can just stop at you're the man.
It's my husband up there calling up the other men. So for me, it's not I'm sitting there yes, my husband needs this. You could be preaching to yourself, but it is just a little bit different. But I don't think that that's an every Sunday thing, in my opinion. I think on occasion.
Do you feel you'll naturally just go, yeah, this doesn't apply to me? Of course, right? You would just kind of.
Oh, for sure. And so it's easy. It would be easy, I feel for me to just be sit back and be oh, okay, well, I don't really have to pay attention. I can think about what I got to do this week. You know what I mean?
Right.
My mind would go other places, and therefore I wouldn't be in the presence of Jesus and experiencing, worshiping, learning, any of that. I definitely think there is a time for it. I don't know that that time is every Sunday from the pulpit.
Can there be a Sunday in your mind?
Yeah. Doesn't have to be a like, oh, it's Father's Day, therefore now I can talk to the men.
Right.
But it could just be like, and that's the other thing too. It's like the pastor has some background knowledge as to what's going on with his congregation. So if he knows that there's like, he's got like wives that are like complaining or having issues or having a hard time or seeking counsel or wisdom for whatever reason, because their husbands aren't leading their family or whatever this is. And he's like, so as the pastor, and you know that that's going on in your church, then I can see you speaking into that and being like, okay, like clearly this is not a single issue. Like right now in our like church congregation, we're struggling with this, and I'm going to speak into that. And kind of, you know, that's the best way to do it. I think when you have that many people, like, you know, multiple
comment
people
below if
issues.
you think men should be called out specifically in a sermon.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think that women need that too, though.
And, okay, with that is, as a male, am I qualified to say, hey, women, you need to be doing this, this, and this?
Well, yes, because you're not telling me what you think I should do. You're telling me what the Bible's telling me I should do.
Right.
So that right there gives you the authority and the qualification to speak into that. Now, obviously, you can't give examples and speak from experience and different things that a female would be able to do, but you can definitely say, like, this is what it says, you know, like older women, are you pouring into the younger women? Like it says in Timothy, like, you know, like you have the authority and ability to do that. And I think it's important because I think a lot of the time, especially in areas like that, like the women are lacking too. Like I know people like my age are like, I don't know any, like there are no older women who are willing to just like sit and pour in their wisdom. Like there are times when it's like, you're a young mom. Like I'm a young mom. I've got 3 kids, 6 and under. And it's like, there are moments where I'm just like, I'm so overwhelmed. And it would be so nice to have like this mom who's like got teenagers, or even further than that. They've got like kids that are grown and have their own kids. And they're like, yes, like this is normal. I've been through this. God is with you. You know what I mean?
So that's it's a woman helping a woman.
Right. But I'm saying, but you can speak into that older woman and tell her, hey, like this is what you're supposed to be doing. This is what the Bible calls you to do.
So I'm actually doing that on
church.
Sunday. So that's good timing.
Well, there you go.
You keep preaching my sermon on Sunday. I haven't even showed you the notes.
You haven't told me anything about it.
That's funny. So on Sunday we're talking about did he call on the men every Sunday? I'm not sure, but I know it was very frequent. I know that it was, and as a man, I liked it. I kept feeling like he was talking straight to me. I'm talking about having spiritual fathers and mothers in the church.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so that's another thing that's interesting. This whole thing is about gender roles, is another additional conversation because, you know, Pastor Mark Driscoll kind of went, it's like how much of this is biblical masculinity, or how much of it is like cultural, like American masculinity, you know, like it was almost like, hey, and a lot of it's great advice though. It's like, get married young, you know, get a job, you know, get married young, have kids, buy that truck, watch UFC, you know? So then it turns into like, well, you don't have to be watching UFC. You don't have to have a truck. You don't have to go hunting. But at the same time, like I love hunting and I love watching UFC, like all those things. So it's that thing where it's like, part of it's like, yeah, that's a fun, manly thing to do. But I also know great men of God who have zero interest in those things.
Right.
You know, so I don't want to be like too stereotypical, but then I don't want to turn into somebody that doesn't believe in distinct. You know, I think there are gender distinctives. There are some things that makes me a man that, you know, there's things that make you a woman. So like on Sunday, I'm looking at 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, and Paul in verse 7 said that he was motherly to the congregation. He nursed them with motherly affection. But also in verse 11, I believe, and 12, he says, but I was a father and I urged you and I called you up. And so then it's like, well, looking at that context, then Paul was able to be motherly. So like in the spirit, we can actually express things that aren't really natural to us.
Right.
It's not natural for me to nurture. Are you kidding
It better
me?
not be
This
pizza.
better not be more pizza. I'm going to be so mad. Unbelievable.
Are you kidding me? You guys.
Not cool. Did I answer again?
Well, you have to. You've got to talk to
Who's
him.
doing this to us?
Did you at least pay for it this time? No, I'm telling the person who sent it to us. Our door's stuck. Golly. I think it's the same delivery guy. Golly, this is getting ridiculous. It's the same delivery guy. He's like, oh, this again? It's Domino's. He's just talking to the guy. I don't know. I'm not I'm not scared by it anymore. Just very annoyed. Like these poor delivery people. Like that's ridiculous. Is it the same delivery
This
guy?
is not funny. This time it was your name.
Mine? Oh my gosh.
Your maiden name too.
What?
Yeah. So we're gonna be having two more. I can't go live anymore.
Oh my gosh. Well, with me apparently, because you've been live twice or multiple times.
Don't tell them. Golly, how frustrating.
It's so annoying.
You want pizza?
If another one comes, sure. That dinner was not good.
Dinner was terrible.
God.
Wow.
Okay, send us some cookies because I'd like some of those. You know, crumble would be great.
So I told them to X our address off where they don't ever deliver to us. You said
so we
okay.
can never order from Domino's.
Never order from Domino's or Papa John's or Pizza Hut.
Oh,
X them off. Where were we? I'm so mad about that. I thought that was a one-off. Now this is like straight up. This isn't like some random person from Asia. This is somebody who like subscribes to me and just keeps doing this.
Right. Yeah, I was like totally freaked out last time. Like, you know, like it was like a big thing and I was freaked. Now I'm just like ticked.
Annoyed.
I'm a one, y'all.
It was
This
the
is
same
not
exact
okay.
guy. He's like, you again?
I heard him. So I was like, you guys, it's the same delivery guy. This poor guy.
We need to have, no, I don't know.
No, I'm annoyed. You just don't do that.
It's so stupid.
There is a right and there's a wrong.
Yeah. All of a sudden I turn into, how dare you? Who do you think you are?
You have to listen to the podcast to get that.
Oh, man.
No, Figaro, don't do it.
Yeah. So, anything else on that?
Oh,
That cat.
I just scared
Where
him.
is it?
He's back there. You can't see him.
Yeah.
We were talking about gender roles.
Yeah, because I'm a complementarian. When a church believes in complementarianism, men have to lead and be pushed to lead. But then it's like, and I agree to that, but then like some people are complementarian to the fact that I think the two institutions is number one is in marriage. So it's like my daughters are not just going to submit to every man. I don't believe that. You know, so in marriage, there's that submission and the leadership, the headship. But also within the church, I've talked about how, what are you laughing about?
Our conversation this week. Keep going.
I'm confused.
On submission. Keep going.
Oh, yeah. And then in the church, you know, I believe like the head pastor role, the pastor, I mean, you see that in 1 Timothy 2, like as a male. But I also think a lot of churches don't empower women nearly enough as they should. And they have a lot that they can do. So they also can be pushed to lead.
Right.
So that's where I struggle, where I'm like, I totally see, it's just so difficult.
But also, why do you have, like, on outside of the occasion, of the, like, you know, the random occasion, why do you have to, like, address it to a specific gender? Like, why can't you be calling all of us
And that's what I've always done.
Forward in our relationship with Christ or apprentices of Jesus, whatever it is.
That's what I've always done, you know? And that is the question. What is the chief goal? Well, let's go. Think media in the house. Every leader can benefit for rise and fall. Dude, I actually referenced your video earlier today. That's Sean Cannell. Sean Cannell
Oh,
on the
nice.
channel. And hey, Sean, have you heard about this? We every time me and my wife go live, literally we get pizza delivered to our house, not paid for though. So then we have to pay for it, which we're not. We just send them away.
Literally, someone.
I'm a
looked up
Baptist preacher. I
our
don't got
address
that.
and is sending us pizza.
So I don't know what to do about that.
It's obnoxious.
But, you know, I think Christ likeness is the goal. And so I think at times that looks different for men and for women, so we can talk about it. But overall, though, like Christ likeness is Christ likeness.
Right.
And that's what we need to keep leading people and conforming them to. It's not to like being men that have shotguns and, goes hunting on the weekends, which I'm cool with. He's tearing up my wall. I can't stand that cat. Think Media is ordering you the pizza. I don't think he would do that, but that's funny. What a bummer summer of what's going on. Got to eat the meat and throw out the bones, but lots of wisdom to glean and cautions for leaders. Absolutely. And so that's what I'm trying to process out loud here is what is the meat, and spitting out. But I do think there is a lot of wisdom, and I think we just so paint it over like, oh, everything he did was terrible. No, he did a lot of good, effective things, and we can learn a lot from him. But yeah, we have to do it with goodness and that. So it is kind of like doxing, man. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, thanks for hopping in, brother. Appreciate you. And that's the question I want to end with, I suppose. And it kind of seemed like the problem where they went, because from the podcast, it says Mars Hill in the beginning, their goal wasn't mega church. Their goal was just like faithfulness. In fact, like there was a clip, I don't know if you remember, where Mark was like, I get worried if I'm growing too fast. That means like I'm not telling them the truth enough. It's like tickling their ears. So they started out that way, really punk rock, but then they kind of became a lot more mega church, started hanging out with like just becoming like this huge church. The most troubling statement that I heard from the podcast is John Piper I can't have another pastor ahead of me because I have the biggest church, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
Like to equate your value and like what you can learn from others. That's why like our number one value at Passion Creek is never stop learning. That means like I learn from my children every day. We learn from everybody. But for them, the bottom line became growth. If it's growing the church.
Truth.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're just preaching what people want to hear. Therefore, people are coming. Therefore, we're growing. Therefore, we must be doing something right.
The cat just stabbed me in the back. Literally. I can't stand that cat. Yeah, I think it's scary. And being in Baptist circles too, it's very much like, hey, the brand episode was crazy. Oh, you did? Oh, right on. But the, growth at all costs, it's hard because you can so easily justify it. Like we're reaching people for Christ. Like, is that not the goal? Is that not why we're here? And so I even recently had somebody say like, why are you reading that book about hell? Like, how is that growing your church? It's like, well, I need to make sure I'm orthodox. Plus, that is evangelism. Plus, like, I'm just trying to be faithful to the Bible. Not everything, like, if you begin to say, okay, I have to do this because it grows my church, you begin to really, like, investing in my marriage. How is that growing the church? Like, at what point does that?
Right.
That just tears you up,
Yeah,
So that's what's hard because church growth is important, but I do believe it can become an idol. Church growth is a pleasant thing, but it's not a perfect thing, right? And it's not, and I think a lot of people, their motive behind a growing church is it gives them authority, it gives them security, it gives them like they are, it gives them a sense of power.
Right.
And that's what was happening. That really corrupted the whole situation.
Yeah, because that just opens the door to step into so many things that you never would have thought about doing before,
Mm-hmm.
Like it just puts you in situations where you can compromise and it's just like, it's not that big of a deal.
There's 3 temptations for every pastor and church leader. And I'm still blown away that Think Media is still watching right now. Number 1 is, and we all talk about it, is burnout, which is why I just took a sabbatical. And I think when you grow at all costs, you never take a sabbatical, right? And so that's scary. If growth is the number 1, where it's just in numbers, getting bigger and bigger. Again, I'm not against that. I think a lot of people who are smaller, they act like, oh, I'm not about getting bigger. And it's just because they can't get bigger. So it's like a front,
right.
To make them feel better about how small their church is. But burnout, number 1. The second biggest thing that kills pastors and leaders.
Oh my
More
gosh.
pizza. More pizza, guys. Do I even act like I'm home? More pizza. What's number 2?
You have to.
Number 2 is moral failure. I'll be back. This is unbelievable.
It's pizza. You guys, seriously. Ay, ay, ay. This is so obnoxious. He just asked what kind of pizza it is. Okay. I'm going to read the comments really quick.
You want pepperoni?
Sure. Flip the pizza to the neighbors for an upcharge. That's funny. He's going to pay it for it this time and just keep it. So this poor lady can not feel like she wasted all her time tonight doing that. Yeah, who knows? Maybe. Oh, my word.
Okay, maybe by getting one pizza, you guys will stop. Maybe you can flip the pizza to neighbors for an upcharge. That's entrepreneurship right there. So I said burnout. And then the second thing, I wonder if this person is just so happy. They just want me to eat, want us to have pizza. The second thing is moral failure. And I think you can morally fail because growth at all costs, right? You're willing to cut corners, blah, blah, blah. The third thing is orthodoxy. That is a temptation for pastors and leaders to begin to only preach what the people want to hear, to begin to explain away passages that are difficult. And so, like, hell is a difficult doctrine, I think, for all of us. That's why I'm reading about it again right now, just to make sure, am I being faithful to the scriptures? What does Jesus say? What does the Bible say about this? And I need to submit, even though I have some thoughts about it, Dude, call your local pizza joints and tell them to call you to confirm the orders from now on.
Seriously.
Oh, that's a good point. It's pretty good, though. We should have said yes to Papa John's.
I was going to say, we should say yes. Pizza's not my favorite. But
Pizza Hut, whatever. So, okay. Growth at all costs is a terrible place to be in. But the systems we're in, being a church planner, I have like certain numbers I have to hit. And if I'm not hitting those numbers, my financial support is lost. So it's a pretty scary situation to be in, So like you do kind of have to have numbers in order to get that support that you need to help support your family. So it's such a scary trap. But this was a good reminder. When you put growth at all cost, it robs your soul,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fine line, I think. And it can lead to so much damage.
Luke, I did not order this pizza, but we're hungry enough. We went to this Mexican food place tonight, and it was terrible. It was tasteless. I thought maybe I got COVID again.
There was literally no flavor.
I looked at Jordan and go, do I have COVID? Because can you taste this burrito? She's like, I can't taste any of it. Even had enchilada sauce on it, and I could taste nothing.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, so who came first? Domino's, because they're just down the street.
It was literally Domino's, Pizza Hut.
So Papa John's is next. So when Papa John's comes, I'm going to have a pizza in my hand and go, it wasn't me. Maybe I shouldn't. They'll be like, what?
No. Yes, you paid for it.
I paid for it this time.
Paid the lady.
Yeah, Sean Cannell is in the chat. How cool is that? And no, I did not pay for it. I mean, sorry, I did pay for it.
Yes.
Golly. Yeah, they're ordering me pizzas without paying it. So then they're like, hey, you owe us $30.
Was it under my name or yours?
Your name.
Mine again. Hey, Chase.
Chase, I was just mentioning you a little bit earlier. We should listen to it like we're looking into a mirror. It's a great advice. Yeah, man,
pizza's just not very good.
It's not good, but I'm trying to make myself like it. It's not. Yeah, this podcast, I think you need to be fearful if you're finding a lot of joy out of it. I think it should bring sorrow. I think you should also not fall into pathological dualism where it's like, okay, he's just, everything about him has always been terrible. No, God has used him. And Chase, you just mentioned something like that in your video today about Joe Solomon. And so, Ruslan's live right now. That might be why I don't have as many people. I should have timed that better. Start putting pizza on Facebook Marketplace and see if people buy it. So, but everybody should get a church called Tove And I think we need to be a better goodness culture. Gosh, I want to pay for your next pizza. Well, guess what? You support me on Patreon, so you already have. Thank you, Luke Perkins. Appreciate you. Thanks for the pizza. The pizza's back, bro. We didn't order it again, but I caved and I bought the second time. Do you hear? Somebody's rolling up right now.
I can never tell if it's the neighbor because he's so many cars and he's always working. But yes, I did hear that before. And then we got the
Where's the wings of blue? I got to go get the rest of that. Maybe Papa John's will bring that. Yeah, can you get creative, bro? Like, bring me. No, just kidding. I need to stop telling this person.
I want cookies.
Yeah. So those are some of our thoughts. I'm very excited about the rest of the episodes. I do think that tell Ruslan this is your time slot. I need to figure out my time slot. And Chase Jones is also my hero. What was I gonna say? Oh. This is another great example of this podcast. Storytelling is so powerful. You can have a sermon all day that talks about be careful with power, it corrupts, blah, blah, blah. But this storytelling is so huge. And that's why we're trying to push more and more people to be on YouTube, to share your story. There's something powerful about it. It shows the power of the gospel. And yeah, just the way that Mike Hosper is approaching this storytelling is incredible. And I really do hope more Christians take from this and go, how else can we be creative? And hopefully it's not always a hit piece on some other person and what they've done wrong, but how can we tell more stories? How can we lead the way or kind of catch up to what the world has already been doing and sharing narratives? I think it's really, really important. It's incredibly well made. I love it. I think it's half of why I like it, just because the artist in me just loves how it's designed and everything. So guys, it's crazy. Think Media has been with us for 20 minutes or so at least. Go check out. He has a Grow with Video live in 5 days. If you are interested in YouTube, I think that's like the best resource. Think Media is always great. I always push people there. I'm not a camera guy. I'm not a lot of like that kind of beginning stuff. Think Media is all of that. And so push people over there. He's a great Christian. Sean Cannell and the whole crew is. So podcast is awesome. I've laughed. I've cried. I've told all my friends to listen to it. Yeah. Oh, it's Ruslan's best music you never heard. Yeah, we're fine. I don't need, yeah. That makes sense. That is his time. Sean Cannell is also my hero. You have a lot of heroes, bro. That's what I like to see. Be careful with hero worship. You know what I'm saying? Oh, I was about to shut down, but look, Diana's in the house. What's up, Diana? Nice. We got Think Media and Diana. I mean, what else do we need? We got the crew. You don't like the pizza, do you?
I don't. Why is Pizza Hut not very good?
It's a great question.
It's not.
Hashtag not sponsored.
Oh,
is there anything else you want to add? What is a man?
Golly. I don't know. I don't know how. It's hard to define.
So I've been struggling with this a lot because I think a lot of my conceptions of manhood, some of it's good, and I need to make sure what's biblical, what's not. I do think we need to be like the head of the house.
Right.
I do think we're visionaries, we're warriors. All that's important. The biggest thing that sticks out to me is 1 Corinthians 13. Paul says, when I was a child, I act like a child, but when I became an adult, a man, I gave up childish things. And that's in the context of love, agape love. So to me, a real man, men are patient, men are kind. They do not envy, they do not boast. They keep no record of wrongs. So instead of love is patient, like that's what we are. I think men are patient, men are kind, all that. So I think that's what real manhood is. And obviously it's ultimately you see it in Christ, but then it's like, but you can also see it for you,
right?
To be like Christ. That doesn't mean that just men can be like Christ.
Right.
So
yeah, I definitely think for sure, just like being the head of the household and leading both spiritually and just, yeah, overall like vision for the family and
yeah,
all of that.
And then I fear about like the single mom. So I'm like, I don't want to make you feel like what you're doing is inferior. But then the single mom goes, no, listen, life's tough. It'd be great if I had a man in the house. Like,
right.
Like call these other men to do this. But I also think we need more spiritual fathers and mothers. We need to, as a church, come around each other and pour into the kids and pour into the mom, the single mom and the foster parents. And
right.
This is, it takes a village.
Yeah.
Cool.
All
right. Well, thanks guys. And, We'll let you know if Papa John's comes. They're a little bit further away from the rest, so they'll be coming. We should have waited for Papa John's. They're all liking Pizza Hut, though. They're all big Pizza Hut fans.
I'm shocked. Is it just not?
My last sabbatical series video should be coming out, documentary, so be looking out for that. I haven't made it yet, but I think that's my next endeavor. Yeah, make sure you guys check out my Patreon. I had a great one-on-one today with one of my patrons, and we're going to talk this week with the rest of the patrons. There's a silent partner. You get nothing out of it. It's just $3 a month. There's the ministry leader, $10 a month. Content creator, we help you, $20 a month, including one of my online courses. And then $100 a month is like all those things plus spiritual direction or whatever you want, hour-long chats with me. So appreciate all the support. Pizza cheers. See you guys later. I prefer Papa John's. Yeah, that's right.
Same.
The garlic sauce and that pepper, that's where it's at. Ah, so good.